Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is my fourth sunglasses gag in a row. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is usually the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about a classic album I love. But this is the fourth and final week of Mod Month. For the entire month of May, I've only covered albums from the past 20 years. You'd be surprised just how many connections this stuff has to the material I usually cover on this channel. Last week was part 3 of Mod Month and the first ever Vinyl Monday double feature. I covered both Cavalcade and Hellfire by Black Midi. If you need to catch up, but 20-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here on my channel and over on my Instagram. I am so excited to be covering this album. I've been waiting to talk about this album. I've been waiting months. This is by my favorite modern band, so all of Mod Month has been leading up to this album, really. Not to be confused with the hippies from Toronto, the final Mod Month album is Blue Rev by Alvvays. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what album I'm gonna cover next week. We'll have to ditch the album title by doing this, but let's take the plastic off very carefully. This is very fragile. So my copy is an original. I bought this at Atticus Books in New Haven, Connecticut, along with my copy of Funhouse by the Stooges. I gotta have a Stooges episode of Vinyl Monday eventually. B-roll Abby is gonna be a lot better at showing you this anyway. I had a fuzzy on me, sorry. But this is on bright blue vinyl. It looks just gorgeous on my turntable. Back to the cover art. So this was designed by band members Molly Rankin and Alec O'Hanley along with Scott Fitzpatrick. This is a photo of lead singer Molly as a kiddo. It was taken by her Aunt Janet. Little Molly is being hoisted out of a boat and onto the dock by her dad and her brother. I don't know why, but it was kind of jarring to learn that Molly wasn't born with the platinum blonde bob, but like nobody is. Anyway, Molly found this photo on a visit home. She dug it out of a photo album and decided on the spot that this was going to be the cover art for the next record. Then we have the back cover with the full track listing. And we also have a decorated sleeve that I'm just using as an insert. We have liner notes on this side and all of the lyrics on the other. On Blue Rev, we of course have the core lineup of Alvvays. We have Molly Rankin on lead vocals and guitar, her songwriting partner and lead guitarist Alec O'Hanley, and Mo's childhood best friend Carrie McLellan on keys and backing vocals. We also have Abby Blackwell. Hey, another Abby. I don't think we've ever had that on this show. She plays bass, and Sheridan Riley on drums. I'm gonna stop now. Special guests include our session drummers Chris Dadge and Moshe Fisher-Rosenberg, Drew Jurica playing cello on Belinda Says and viola on Tile by Tile, and Joe Shabison of The War on Drugs playing flute and sax. Blue Rev was produced by Sean Everett. There's that War on Drugs connection with Molly and Alec. Roll transition. Okay, so to get the full story on how Blue Rev came to be, we actually have to cover a lot of this group's history. So here is a brief history of Alvvays. 2014 brought the self-titled debut record, produced in part with a grant from the Canadian Music Fund. Alvvays had this really 60s forward sound starting out. What set these guys apart was that shimmery, summery sound along with Alec and Molly's timeless lyricism. Songs like Archie Marry Me could have shared the radio waves with, like, Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks in 1969, just the same as they took college radio by storm in 2014. The magnetic fields were also a huge influence on this writing. With 2017 comes the follow-up, Anti-Socialites. This is the one album of theirs I don't have because I'm holding out for the solid yellow vinyl. Someday it will be mine. This album holds on to that youthful feeling. Think songs like Hey, Lollipop, Twin Soul Punks, and a song like Dreams Tonight carries over the wistful feeling of, say, Party Police over here. But then you get to a track like In Undertow, where Alvvays takes those rose-colored glasses off. During this album cycle, Phil McIsaac takes a step back from being a full-time member of the band to focus on his other career that isn't being a drummer. Enter the first key player in the Blue Rev story, touring drummer Sheridan Riley. Brief note, Sheridan's discography is a total rabbit hole to fall down. They've been a working musician since they were like 15, and they've been in a lot of groups. Anyway, they tour with Alvvays for 2 years and just kinda never leave. Work on the Anti-Socialites follow-up begins in 2019, with Easy on Your Own and Pomeranian Spinster being the first 2 songs written for the project. Alvvays were booked at the legendary Sunset Sound Studios in LA. I've mentioned that place so many times on this series. But Blue Rev doesn't come along until 2022. So, what happened? Well, pretty much everything that could have happened did happen. It starts with Molly's apartment being broken into. The hard drive with those demos on it is stolen and never recovered. Literally the next day, the basement holding all of the band's gear floods. And then just a few weeks later, March of 2020. Of course, the Parfumeme. If you're a group in the 60s and you all live and work under the same roof, this wouldn't really be a problem for you. This might actually be kind of paradise. But here's the thing. Molly, Alec, and Carrie are all Canadian. They were all in Toronto. Sheridan is American, and they were stuck in the United States. So for over a year, almost 2 years, Alvvays just can't rehearse. But what would I give to have a Zoom party with Alvvays? That just sounds so fun. The band goes radio silent for the entire Parfumeme. Rumors of a breakup are swirling because it is looking like the dreaded hiatus. But little did we know, Alvvays was in fact cooking away at Blue Rev in secret. The Parfumeme provides lots of downtime to watch series like The Thick of It, or even rewatch Freaks and Geeks for the 100th time, get into gardening, catch up on reading. Canadian rock bands, they're just like us. Molly got into reading short story anthologies. She notes Dear Life by Alice Munro as an influence, and the song After the Earthquake is based on a collection by Murakami. Of course, a lot of time was spent online. See Very Online Guy. Molly describes absent-mindedly humming the tune one day as kind of a joke, but Alec found it so funny and liked it so much that the two jammed on it and wrote the song around it. The group uses their downtime to revisit old influences as well as picking up on some new ones. College radio staples like Yola Tango, who I'm very sorry to say I've never gotten into, and Sonic Youth. Carrie's the Sonic Youth fan of the group, Alec is the Yola Tango guy. The track Tom Verlaine is of course named for the frontman of the group Television. R.I.P. Tom. Another influence which is especially relevant to Blue Rev is shoegaze. If you've ever seen Alvvays live, you know that Alec likes to play his guitar very loud with lots of feedback and so much reverb. And of course, that was the MO of groups like My Bloody Valentine or my personal favorite, Slowdive. Molly brings Teenage Fan Club to the table, saying their stuff is part of the band's ideology at this point in an interview with Stereo Gum. Rachel Brodsky, you are a god for conducting this interview. This piece, the NME piece, and the podcast that Al and Mo were just on, all of those resources were integral to the writing of this video. Molly also had the Go-Go's on the brain, always covers Rush Hour over on Sirius XM during this album cycle, and Belinda Says is named for Belinda Carlisle. Molly talks about how the legacy of radio had a hand in Blue Rev's creation. This is also from the Stereo Gum piece. A thing that I think is really beautiful is hearkening back to a day where the radio is your friend. I would throw on the local station that was playing all the current hits. You feel like they're keeping you company. To embody the view of Belinda Says, it's like, if Belinda says this, then it must be true. Just like picture that with a very Canadian accent. That's Molly. After revisiting Heaven is a Place on Earth, Al and Mo sit down to write Belinda Says. This is a song about a young woman, possibly still a teenage girl, who finds herself alone, world-weary, and pregnant. She moves to the country to have her kid with a scrap of optimism, maybe even just the drive to go on that this Belinda Carlisle song gave her. Memories of coming of age in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia had a heavy hand in Blue Rev too. See, the Canadian vodka energy drink that this record is named for us dumb Americans, think the equivalent of the original Four Loko formula. So learning all of this, I could not help but wonder, what was Sheridan up to this whole time? Well, being a touring drummer, they were relegated to being in all of their groups through exclusively email, and they hated it. The PMMM gave Sheridan the realization of just how much they love and thrive in collaboration. October 2021 comes. The Canadian border is finally reopened, and Alvvays finally reunites. They play a one-off show on Halloween in California, I think this was, all dressed as ZZ Top, with Mo in a cowboy hat and all of the others wearing fake beards. The internet freaked out, and so did I. But 3 days before this show, their bassist up and quits. Now, imagine you haven't played a show in years. You've been working through a burglary, through a flood, through a global pandemic. You're so close to the light at the end of the tunnel, and with 3 days to go until your comeback gig, your bassist fucking quits. Incredible! I'm telling you, everything that could have gone wrong with this record's production did go wrong. Enter the second key player in the Blue Rev story. Abby Blackwell comes and saves the day. The connection there is Sheridan. They knew her from the Seattle music scene. Abby learns the entire Alvvays discography in 3 days, plays the California show with the group, and just kind of never leaves. Are you noticing a pattern here? The lineup is nailed down, restrictions are eased up enough that they can work. Alvvays finally begins work on Blue Rev. Producer Sean Everett is brought onto the project. He's worked with The Killers and he's worked with The War on Drugs. Mo describes working with him as this huge shock to the senses. He's a wild man and a scientist, as she described him in NME, and as soon as you walk into the studio, you're just in his universe. after spending so much time apart, always needed an intensive rehearsal schedule to get back in their groove. Sean recommended that they play the record all the way through, no stops, twice a day. So that's what they did. They'd play through the whole thing twice in one day, no stops for mistakes, less than a minute break between each song, and only about a half hour between run-throughs. Now, as militant as this sounds, from how the band describes it, it was actually a pretty fun process. There were lots of laughs, lots of scrambling, and by the end, the band had gotten back into their groove. They were no longer afraid to mess up in front of each other. Sean also convinced them to record the whole thing directly to tape. This was a huge leap of faith. Alvvays was historically more methodical with their recording process, so to just go completely on the fly, yeah, they had to have a lot of trust in Sean to let him do that. So after the odyssey that would have doomed any other band's project, Alvvays finally came out the other side with their album. The track listing of that album, Blue Rev, goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Pharmacist, followed by Easy on Your Own. Then, After the Earthquake, next Tom Verlaine, then Pressed, followed by Many Mirrors, and side 1 closes with Very Online Guy. Opening up side 2, we have Velveteen, followed by Tile, then Pomeranian Spinster, next Belinda Says, then Bored in Bristol, and the album closes with Lottery Noises. Kind of. There is a hidden track on this thing, and it's called Fourth Figure. After being radio silent for years and 5 years passing since Antisocialites, Blue Rev had become one of the most hyped releases of 2022. This album made quite a few year-end best of lists, and Belinda Says topped Pitchfork's best songs of 2022. Yes, Belinda Carlisle herself has heard Belinda Says. She loves the song and wants to perform it with Alvvays someday. She said this in April of this year. I'll be posting this in May. Who knows what's to come for the future? Alvvays has been booked and busy this album cycle. They did the sweetest little Nardwuar interview in which Molly does a little jig. They went on tour through the fall of 2022 into the spring of 2023 to promote the record, and I went to this tour. If you were at the College Street Music Hall show on November 15th, hi! We were in the same room. Sorry. Not only did I make it to this tour, I grabbed a set list. Don't worry, I'm going to be showing this in the B-roll so you can see what they played. Thank you to the equipment tech who handed this to me. Thank you to Michael for bringing me to this show. And thank you to the nice person we met at the barricade who helped me reach over and grab this. Also, if you were at that gig with me, then congratulations, we were all in the same room as Anthony Fantano. I don't know what to do with this information. You won't know what to do with this information. There you go. So there was this TikTok going around when Blue Rev was released. The gist of it being, while the Blue Rev material is good, it's an elaboration on the signature Alvvays sound, the poor mixing, quote, kills its replay value. All of us at the barricade were kind of poking fun at this TikTok. I laugh at anyone who unironically uses the term replay value. 6 months later, I find out that TikTok we were all clowning about at the show, yeah, my buddy made it. Mark, I am so sorry. Well, Mark, this one's for you. we made the same realization that not a lot of people were singing along to the Blue Rev material at our shows. Now, I chalked this up to the album being out for less than a month, and October 2022 was a very active time in pop music. Mark said it was because the vocal tracks are so all over the place. You can hear vocals clearly on some songs, and you just can't on others. And Mark, I think I know why this happened. After years of trying to get this project to move forward, Alvvays took their sweet time with this album. They put their heads down and work, but they're not ones to rush. That is, until they had to. They ran out of time. In the end stages of Blue Rev production, it came to the band's attention that if they wanted to have the physical release, like the vinyl I'm holding, out at the same time as the record, or if they wanted to release in 2022 at all, they had to have the final mix handed in by Monday. They learned this information on Saturday morning. The next 48 hours was a hellish back-to-back all-nighter of last-minute overdubs and only getting like 2 hours time to mix each track. The final album was handed in at Monday morning at like 7 a.m. and that was it. I wasn't sold on this album at first. I'll be honest, I agree with Mark. There are some serious issues with this album's mix. There are track-to-track volume adjust issues. Vocals are clear on, Easy on Your Own, After the Earthquake, Belinda Says, but swamped on Pharmacist and Velveteen. I believe this is reflective of Alvvays simply running out of time, having to accept that their project is not and will never be 100% perfect. So, what changed my mind? I wasn't sold on Blue Rev until I saw it live. After my gig, this album worked its way into my everyday listening, and I have spent so many hours with this one. Blue Rev is so ingrained into my everyday listening that listening to it for this Vinyl Monday felt like avoiding Vinyl Monday listening with everyday listening. This episode felt like cheating. Alvvays has a certain magic about them with this record, and I think that magic is their new rhythm section. Alvvays seems to have a different rhythm section with every release, but God, I hope this one stays. 2 songs make a case for Abby and Sheridan being the MVPs of this iteration of the band. Very Online Guy and After the Earthquake. First, Very Online Guy. This song is a huge stylistic departure for Alvvays. I didn't know I was holding out for an Alvvays bass line to get stuck in my head until this song came along. Very Online Guy is so much fun, and it probably wouldn't have happened without the effeminate. Also, I think it's so funny that people hail Very Online Guy as this takedown of chronically online dude bros, when really it's Alvvays is equivalent to Octopus's Garden. Before we bring up After the Earthquake, hey, can we run the tapes back to the December 19th episode? I know I always say that a band is only as good as their drummer, but I never really listened to drumming until I had a drummer fave. Shout out to Sheridan Riley from Alvvays. Thank you. I'm not kidding when I say Sheridan was the drummer that made me pay attention to drummers. Not Keith Moon, not Bonzo, Sheridan. Do you have any idea how hard it is to have stage presence behind a kit? And they just do it so effortlessly. Fuck off, you're perfect. Their drumming is dynamic, and the mix of this record, as flawed as it is, it gives the drums room to breathe, so they feel like they're louder even when they're not. The fills in the last 30 seconds or so of After the Earthquake, they make my heart skip a beat. It's because they're so great. No other reason. After the Earthquake feels like it's rushing at you with so much momentum. It's like a wave is crashing down on you. This is Sheridan's solo record under the name Peg. This is Sideshows. If you like Alvvays, you have to go listen to this record. It's so fucking good. It's my album of the year so far. All right, enough gushing over a fave rave. I guess I have to talk about the record some more now. I picked up on these recurring themes of waiting around and a long time until a return. Think the opening line of the record, I know you're back, I saw your sister at the pharmacy. A pharmacist. The bridge of Easy on Your Own. I waited so long for you, wasted some of the best years of my life. Belinda Says you have a character calling collect. The Borden Bristol chorus, always waiting. The album ends with a realization in Lottery Noises. It's abundantly clear that no one's coming for me. But then you have that hidden track Fourth Figure. I take the photo off the fridge, but know that I still wait for you. I still don't know what to make of this twist after the conclusion, the acceptance in Lottery Noises. I also picked up on a callback to an old song, Adult Diversion, off the self-titled record. The narrator resigns themselves to going back to university. In Easy on Your Own, they've dropped out. The front half of this record is rooted in the Alvvays that this album established and Antisocialites elaborated on. I'm one to point out a good 3 or 4 track run, and this album has one. Pharmacist, Easy on Your Own, After the Earthquake, and Tom. I really dig Pressed. It's a heavy dose of Alvvays nostalgia. It harkens back to Antisocialites in a big way. I wouldn't be surprised if Pressed was an early song written along with Easy on Your Own and Pomeranian. Tom Verlaine is the most 60s forward thing they've done since self-titled. While the front half of the record is weighted towards this 90s does 60s thing, the Alvvays thing, the back half of the record is very 80s forward. I don't know if I'm crazy for this observation, but I noticed that some of the crossfades on the back half of the album, Velveteen and Tile by Tile, they fade into nothing. This leads me to believe that the track listing was shuffled around at the last minute to favor this duality of the A-side and the B-side. For the most part, I think this was for the better. It took a few listens for me to get a feel for Velveteen and Tile by Tile. At first, I thought they'd have been better for a hypothetical Blue Rev B-sides like they did with Antisocialites, which is a shame because these two songs are two of Moe's best vocal performances on here. While the songs aren't duds by any means, they are a weak point in this track listing. It's the point where all of the songs start to mush together. I know that's a very popular shoegaze critique, and I roll my eyes at it too, but giving credit where credit is due, Tile by Tile are some of the glitziest keys that have ever been on an Alvvays song, and the opening guitar does almost an XX self-titled thing. I grew to like Velveteen, not so much for the song's production or its structure, but for its writing. There's this theme of one person moving on while the other person hasn't. It shows up a lot on Blue Rev, and it comes up on their older material too. I will say that topic is a soft spot for me. I'm a sucker for songs that revolve around that story. Belinda Says is the emotional climax of the record, and it proves that Al and Moe are a songwriting force to be reckoned with. They did it once with Archie Marry Me, they did it again with Dreams Tonight, and they do it again with Belinda Says. These guys are just a modern classic machine. Al wrote the track's namesake line. Belinda says heaven is a place on earth, well, so is hell. And I think Mo was the one who came up with the key change to reference heaven is a place on earth. I like that their songwriting is tongue-in-cheek, but not cutesy. It could get really old if it was cutesy, but it's not. Belinda says also embodies what makes the Blue Rev production so special. With those other two records, it sounds like you're looking down at your feet in the shallow end of a pool. It's pretty and you really like it, but you don't know that you're lacking the depth until you listen to something like Blue Rev, which feels like, you know, looking down in dark blue water and not being able to see the bottom. I can't find the root of any of these songs. It feels like I'm stuck in the crashing wave. You know how waves kind of cycle like this? It feels like I'm caught in that. I love it. And finally, the closer, Lottery Noises with Fourth Figure. Always knows how to write a closer, but I have to say I do favor Saved by a Waif and Forget About Life on Antisocialites. It was literally on my bucket list to see that live, and look what the final song was before the encore. It was Saved by a Waif. What I'm trying to say is Alvvays has finally had their aha moment with Blue Rev in so many ways. This album feels like a scar on your knee. You have a fond memory of the youth that brought that scar and all the fun times you had, but you remember the pain of when it was fresh, even a dull pain long after it's healed. I don't often outright finish these things with, I love this record, but today I am. I love Blue Rev. My personal favorites on this one are Pharmacist, Easy on Your Own, After the Earthquake, Pressed, Pomeranian Spinster, Belinda Says, and fuck it, Bored in Bristol. If you want to keep up with all the faves from all the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that was the final episode of this year's Vinyl Monday Mod Month. That was Blue Rev by Alvvays. What do you think of this album? What do you think of this band? What did you think of Mod Month? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about the albums I love. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!